I'm going to tie a red-faced wobbler, and this is one of my favorite warm water flies. I'm starting off with a size 6 streamer hook, and I'm not going to add a cone or bead head to it, but I am going to add some additional weight by the way of lead. So I'm going to take a pretty aggressive diameter here, and I'm going to wrap this on the front half of the hook shank, and I'm going to end it with about a eye width worth of hook shank in front of the lead so that I can tie in my hackle and finish the head on this. So happy with that, then I'm going to take my thread. I'm going to use a 70 red for this, and I'll just get it started here in the front of the hook shank, reach all the way back, gather it, and then bring my wraps through to get it good and locked in. And bring it down to the point in the hook, and then I can just clip off the excess. Now for the tail of this, and tying this isn't too much different than tying a woolly bugger. Actually less steps than that. The tail is going to be a marabou, and so you can tie these in a lot of different color choices. For me, the most effective probably has been a tan in both my woolly buggers and my red-faced wobbler, but for some variety today I'm going to tie it in a chartreuse. And so I've selected a good plume here, and I'm going to make this extend about a hook shank in length. And so I'll just take my measurements, switch hands, make my cut, place it just behind that lead, and then I'll make sure I take a couple of good turns to keep it secure. Now I can add some flash, and for this I'll keep it in the same color family. This is a crystal flash, and it has a greenish hue to it. And when I tie in my flash, I'm going to do just 3 pieces of flash aside. So I'll clip off the ends for a good tie-in point. I'll measure this back to be as long as my tail, and then trim it. And then I'll just repeat the process on the other side. So I've got my strands. Tie it in and cut it to be the same length as my marabou. So now with the tail done, you can move on to the body, and for that I'm going to use a crystal chenille, a crystal flash chenille, and this is in a larger size. So I'll take off a substantial section, maybe 8 to 10 inches worth. You just don't want to run out till you get to the bottom of the top of the pattern. So I'll go ahead and tie this in, and I'm tying it in to run the length of the hook shank, and I do that so it creates some more bulk, a little bit more substantial pattern. And I'm going to leave this thread just in front of my lead. So now I can take my turns through. One thing that's important as you do this is to work these fibers back towards the tail with each wrap, so that it creates, again, more volume to the pattern. You're not trapping those fibers underneath. So just kind of every turn I'm stroking the fibers back towards the tail. And when I get to my thread, I'll just tie it off. And I can trim the excess, and I'm just going to make a couple of cuts here where the fibers have gotten to the eye of the hook. And then what I can do is just hold all this back and start a nice spot for my hackle to go. So at this point, if this would be a woolly bugger, you'd have the hackle to kind of polymer up and create that taper for you. You don't have that in this case, so what I'll do is I'll cut in a taper, and I try to select kind of the midway point, and that's where I start. So just making my cuts, tapering back towards the tail. I'll keep my scissors at the same angle and just rotate the vise as I go along. For these fibers in the back, I'll trim some of them up, but I kind of like the look of leaving some of these in there. It just makes a nice transition between it and then the flash that you tied in earlier. And that's why it's important to select flash that's very comparable. They blend into one another. I'll do a little bit of trimming here at the top. The goal for me when I tie these is to have the hackle that I select to be the same diameter as the front of the fly, maybe a little bit longer. So now that I have that trimmed to suit my eye, I'll select a piece of saddle hackle, and for this, I'm particular about it. I want to make sure that I select kind of a narrow bodied hackle. So I've picked a piece of red. I'll tie this in by the tip. And I'm just going to trim that. And now I'll just wet these fibers back. And the goal for this, you've got a short distance here, so I'm not going to advance it. I just want to create a collar of red hackle. And so just like you did with the chenille, every wrap I'm stroking these fibers back so that they lay towards the tail. I'm not really gaining any ground on the eye. And after maybe 4 or 5 wraps, I'll then tie it off. So a couple wraps on top and underneath, and then I'll trim it. And you can see my taper was about right. The tips of this hackle extend just beyond the body or the head of this fly. So now I can tie in a thread head, and I will go back on the fibers a little bit so that it helps them lay back. And when I'm pleased with the look of that, then I'll just come back through with a whip finish. Trim the excess, and I'll put a drop of head cement on the threads. And that'll keep everything nice and tight. So there it is, pretty easy pattern, and like I said, been one of my better producing streamers, especially warm water this year, and it is the red-faced wobbler.